I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine the most important day of your life, the day you have planned for, dreamed about, cried over in the quiet hours of the morning. The flowers are perfect, the music is soft, the person you love is standing at the end of the aisle, looking at you like you are the only person in the world. Now imagine, in the middle of that moment, a door opens, and the person who once told you that you were nothing walks in. That was my wedding day. His name was Daniel, and for 2 years before that September afternoon, he had been the voice in my head that quietly, consistently, patiently told me I wasn't quite enough, not cruel enough to leave immediately, not obvious enough to explain easily, just a slow, steady pressure, like a hand on your shoulder that starts as comfort and becomes, over time, something that keeps you from standing up straight. He came to my wedding uninvited. He came with a smirk. He came with something in his hand and something prepared on his lips. He had planned this. That much was clear to me the moment I saw his face. This wasn't impulse. This was a man who had decided, deliberately, to walk into the most important room of my life and remind me of who he believed I still was. What Daniel did not know, what he could not have known, because he had stopped paying attention to me the moment I stopped being useful to him, was what the 3 years since he left had actually looked like. He didn't know about the promotion. He didn't know about the stage. He didn't know about the woman in the excellent blazer who handed me her card and told me to use my voice more. He didn't know about the team I was leading, the accounts I had grown, the version of myself I had rebuilt from the floor of the apartment he walked out of. He thought he was walking into a room where the woman on the kitchen floor was getting married. He was walking into a room where someone else entirely was waiting for him. This is my story, and I have thought about telling it for a long time. Not because I need anyone to know it, not because I have anything to prove, but because I absolutely know, that somewhere out there, someone is sitting with their own version of Daniel's voice in their head. Someone is making themselves smaller right now because someone they love has convinced them that their edges are too sharp and their ambitions are too loud and their confidence is a problem that needs to be managed. This is for her. This is for you. My name is not important. What happened next is. Let me take you back to the beginning. To understand what happened at my wedding, you have to understand who I was before Daniel walked into my life, and more importantly, who I was before I let him change me. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, not the kind of small town that shows up in movies, quaint storefronts, a square with a fountain, autumn leaves in perfect colors. The real kind of small town, the kind with a Dollar General and a shuttered movie theater and a high school gymnasium that doubled as a community center for every event worth attending. I was the middle child of 5. My father taught high school history at the same school he had attended himself, which he seemed to find either poetic or ironic depending on the year. My mother worked as a nursing aide at the county hospital. She had done so for 22 years when I left for college, and the way she talked about her patients, with that specific combination of exhaustion and fierce protectiveness, taught me more about what it means to show up for people than anything I ever learned in a classroom. We weren't poor. I want to be clear about that because it matters to how I understood myself. We were not a family in crisis. We were a family that was always, just barely, keeping pace with itself. There were years when back-to-school shopping meant 1 new thing instead of 3. Years when the heat got turned down at night in ways you noticed in the morning. Years when Christmas was homemade cards and my parents' quiet, dignified apologies that somehow made the gifts feel more valuable than anything money could have purchased. My older sister Claire and I shared a room for 15 years. We also shared shoes in the years when it came to that. I want you to understand that I did not carry that as shame. I carried it as information. Information about what was available to me and what I would need to build for myself. I studied like it was the only door out of the house, because it was. I graduated near the top of my class. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I got a partial scholarship to a state university in Columbus, and I treated it like the most valuable thing anyone had ever handed me, because it was. At university, I studied business and communications. I worked 2 jobs, 5 in the morning at a campus coffee shop, which meant I woke up at 4:15 every weekday in the dark and the quiet, making coffee for people who were still half asleep and had no idea someone had been awake for an hour before they arrived. Thursday and Friday evenings, I worked data entry for a real estate firm downtown, the kind of work that sounds small but teaches you precision and patience and what it feels like to still be at a desk at 9 in the evening when everyone else has gone home. I graduated in 3.5 years, walked across the stage in a rented gown, holding a diploma and a 3.8 GPA, and exactly 0 family members in the stands. My parents couldn't afford the trip. I have never, not once, held that against them, but I remember the moment. Standing in that gymnasium with families all around me, balloons and cameras and mothers weeping, and fathers standing too straight because they didn't know what to do with their faces, and feeling a specific combination of pride and aloneness that I had no vocabulary for at the time. I was proud of what I had done, and I had done it entirely alone. That aloneness is important. I want you to hold it in mind as I keep going, because it is the thing that made me reach for Daniel the way I did. Not desperation. I was never desperate, but hunger. The very specific hunger of someone who has been self-sufficient for so long that the first person who offers genuine warmth feels like something rare and necessary and true. I moved to Columbus after graduation, took a junior marketing position at a mid-size advertising agency, rented a studio apartment that was smaller than my childhood bedroom, but mine in a way nothing had ever been before. I bought a single houseplant, a pothos, which is almost impossible to kill, and I put it on the windowsill and felt, quietly and privately, that I was beginning. I met Daniel 6 months later. He was a senior account manager at the same firm, tall, easy in his movements, the kind of man who seemed to take up exactly the right amount of space in a room. Never too much, never too little, just confident enough that you noticed him, and confident enough that he seemed to already know you had. He noticed me at a team lunch, asked a question about a campaign I had been working on, listened to my answer, and then said, unprompted, simply in front of 3 colleagues who probably didn't think it was significant, that my instinct on that particular problem was exactly right. I was 23 years old, and I had spent my entire life being the hardest working person in a room that was still, somehow, not quite looking at me. He looked at me. In the beginning, he made me feel seen, genuinely seen. He remembered the details, how I took my coffee, the name of my sister, the thesis of a conversation we'd had 2 weeks prior. He texted me good morning before I was awake. He told me I was the smartest woman he had dated. He said I had a way of approaching problems that was different from anyone he'd ever known. I fell for him with the totality of someone who had been saving up, and that is exactly what he was counting on. I didn't know that yet. The change, when it came slowly. It always does, I think. That's the thing no one tells you. It doesn't arrive with a label. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives dressed as concern, dressed as observation, dressed as the kind of thing a person who loves you would say. A comment, early on, about the way I laughed at work events. He said it was loud. He said people noticed. He said it lightly, almost fondly, the way you might point out a small stain on someone's shirt, not to humiliate, just to inform. I laughed less at work events after that. A suggestion, a few months later, that I might want to let others lead more in meetings, that I came across sometimes as a little aggressive when I pushed my ideas, that people responded better to women who invited collaboration rather than driving it. I was 24 years old. I had grown up being told that hard work and speaking up were virtues, that confidence was something to be cultivated, not contained. And now the man I was in love with was quietly, regularly, carefully suggesting that my confidence was not a strength, but a liability. That the things that had gotten me to this room were the very things making it hard for me to belong here. I started adjusting. I want you to understand that I did not think of it as shrinking. I thought of it as learning. I thought I was becoming more sophisticated, more attuned to how I came across, more considerate of the people around me. Daniel framed it that way, as growth, as emotional maturity, as the kind of self-awareness that separates people who merely succeed from people who truly lead. I believed him. I trusted him. He was older, more established, more experienced. I thought he was teaching me something. But underneath all of that, underneath the cereal and the concealer and the Thursday phone calls, something was happening that I didn't have words for yet. I was getting angry. Not loudly, not in a way that looked like anger from the outside, just a quiet, growing, completely clarifying anger. The kind that doesn't want to break things, it wants to build them. The kind that looks at everything it gave away and decides, simply, to take it back. 8 months after Daniel left, a promotion was posted internally at the agency. It was the same level I had turned down a year and a half earlier because Daniel said the timing wasn't right and I might not be ready. I applied. Not because I was certain I would get it, not because I had done some dramatic internal work and emerged transformed, but because Daniel's voice had told me not to, and that voice no longer had the authority it once did. I got it. The day I found out, I sat at my desk for a long moment and I thought about that kitchen floor. I thought about a woman sitting on cold tile with pasta boiling behind her, being told she had become small. And I thought, okay, let's find out how small. From there, things moved the way things move when you stop second-guessing the direction. I started saying yes to things again. A marketing conference the following spring, I submitted a proposal for a speaking slot on digital brand storytelling. I sent it before I could think too long about it. It was accepted. I stood on a stage in front of 200 marketing professionals, and I spoke. Not carefully, not with the hedging and the pre-apologies and the softening I had learned to do. I spoke the way I used to speak, directly, with conviction, with the confidence of someone who had thought about this longer and harder than most people in the room and knew it. Afterward, a woman in the front row came up to me. She was perhaps 15 years older than me, sharp eyes, an excellent blazer, the kind of woman who moves through rooms like she built them. She handed me her card. She said, "You have a voice. Use it more." Her name was Patricia Chen. She was the regional director of one of the largest digital marketing firms in the Midwest. We had coffee the following Tuesday. She asked me where I wanted to be in 5 years. I told her the truth, a more complete and ambitious truth than I had allowed myself to say out loud to anyone, and she listened to all of it without once suggesting it was too much. She became my mentor. And she became something else too, a model of what it looked like to be a woman who took up exactly the right amount of space and made absolutely no apologies for it. Over the next 18 months, I was promoted again. I was leading a team of 12 people. I was managing accounts larger than anything I had imagined for myself in the Daniel years. I presented at 2 more conferences. I was asked to contribute to an industry publication. I was, by any external measure, doing well. But the thing I am most proud of from that period is not any of those things. The thing I am most proud of is that I did all of it without once asking anyone's permission, without once softening my ideas before I said them out loud, without once turning down an opportunity because someone I loved suggested I might not be ready. I did it for me. Not for Daniel. Not as revenge. Revenge requires you to keep thinking about someone, and I was increasingly uninterested in spending my thinking on him. I did it because the original version of myself, the girl who woke up at 4:15 in the dark to make coffee before anyone else was awake, the girl who wore her sister's shoes and still showed up, she had been buried, and she was done waiting. I met Marcus at a dinner party on a Friday evening in October. I had almost not gone. I was tired. I had a quarterly report due the following Monday, and dinner parties in my experience require you to be more socially present than I had the energy for that night. My friend Renee, who had invited me, texted me 3 times. I went. Marcus was a structural engineer. He worked on bridge infrastructure, the kind of work that is unglamorous in description and quietly essential in practice. He was not loud. He was not electric in the way that Daniel had been electric. He did not walk into a room and command it. What he did was settle into it. He was the kind of person who made the room feel like it had a steady floor. We talked for 3 hours at that dinner. about work and cities and a book we had both read, and a neighborhood in Columbus that was being rebuilt badly. He disagreed with me twice, genuinely disagreed, clearly and without apology, and both times he wanted to hear my response before he continued. He was interested in what I thought, not in managing it or shaping it or directing it towards something more comfortable for him, just actually interested. We went on a first date the following week, a second, a third. He was dressed well. He was always dressed well. Presentation was the first language he spoke, before anything else, always. He had the expression I knew from 2 years of mornings, the expression that said, "I am the most interesting thing in this room, and I know it, and we both know I know it, and I would like to have a moment acknowledging that before we proceed." He was holding a piece of paper. He had not been invited. He had not been considered. He was not present in any version of this day that I had planned or imagined. And yet there he was, standing in the doorway of my wedding with 300 people between us, and an expression on his face that told me everything I needed to know about why he had come. He came because he needed to believe I was still broken. He came because the alternative, that I had rebuilt entirely, that I was happy, that the day he left me on the kitchen floor was the first day of something he would never fully understand, was something he couldn't accommodate. He came to remind me of who I was when he knew me. The room had gone very quiet. Marcus, at the altar, was watching. I could feel his attention on me the way you feel weather changing. He had gone still in the way that steady men go still when they are deciding what is needed of them. Daniel cleared his throat, loud enough for the room. He said, "I'm sorry to interrupt." He did not sound sorry. He said, "I think there are some things that should be said before this goes any further." He held up the paper. I found out later what it was, a personal email I had sent to a colleague years ago, something vulnerable and embarrassing, taken entirely out of context, something he had clearly saved with deliberate care against exactly this kind of moment. He had been carrying it, waiting. He opened his mouth to read it, and I started walking. Not away from him, toward him. Every step I took down that aisle in reverse, the room got quieter. I could feel 300 people holding their breath. I could feel my mother's hands folded in her lap, and my father's shoulders going straight, and Renee watching me with an expression that I can only describe as fierce and proud and a little bit afraid for me. I stopped 2 feet from Daniel. He had not expected this. I watched the smirk flicker. I watched his certainty shift slightly, like a man who had rehearsed a scene and discovered the other actor had different lines. I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I said, "Daniel, I know exactly why you're here. I spent 2 years of my life making myself smaller because I thought that's what love required. And then I spent 3 years growing back everything I gave away. I want to genuinely thank you, because the woman standing in front of you right now, she exists because you left." He opened his mouth. I kept going. "You can read whatever is on that paper. You can say whatever you came here to say, but I want you to do one thing first." I gestured, slowly, calmly, at the room behind me. "Look at this room. Look at these people. Look at that man at the altar." I held his gaze. "And then tell me honestly, do you believe anything you're holding is going to matter more than what I already have?" The silence was complete. Daniel did not speak. I turned around and I walked back down the aisle. My father was the one who walked Daniel out. I did not ask him to. I did not need to. He simply stood up from his seat in the front row, calmly, without urgency, with the quiet authority of a man who has spent 30 years teaching teenagers to take responsibility for themselves and knows exactly what to do when someone refuses. And he walked to the back of the room. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. He said something quietly. I did not hear it from where I was standing. Later, after the reception, after the dancing and the cake and my mother's toast that made everyone cry, I found my father at a table near the window, and I asked him what he had said. He looked at me for a moment. He said, "I told him, son, this chapter's already been written. Time to go." Daniel went. The doors closed. The room took a breath. And then Marcus did the thing that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. He started clapping. Slowly, deliberately. Just him, standing at the altar in his suit, with his eyes bright and that expression on his face. The one that said, "I see exactly who you are, and I have never once found it to be a problem." He was clapping for me. Not for the drama, not for the confrontation, for me. And then the room joined him. It started in the front rows and moved backward like a wave, and within seconds 300 people were on their feet, and the sound of it filled that old warehouse from the industrial beams to the concrete floor. And I stood in the middle of my own wedding in my dress with my flowers, and I cried. I want to be precise about that. I did not cry when Daniel left. I did not cry at my promotion or my graduation or the stage in front of 200 people. I am not, by nature, a public crier. But I cried then. Standing at the back of that room with all those people and my mother's hand pressed over her heart, and my father already walking back toward his seat with the expression of a man who has tidied something up. I cried because I had spent so many years believing that taking up space was a problem. And here was a room full of people, standing up to tell me it wasn't. My father took my arm. We walked down the aisle together, properly this time, all the way to the end. I married Marcus on a golden September afternoon, with string lights and flowers, and the people I loved most arranged around us like something I had earned. We danced until the venue turned the lights up. My sister Claire danced until her heels came off, and she switched to socks, which she had apparently brought as backup, which tells you everything you need to know about Claire. Patricia, my mentor, hugged me at the end of the night and said only, "Well done," which, from Patricia, is an entire speech. As for Daniel, I heard through the loose network of mutual acquaintances that connects people who have worked in the same industry in the same city, that he spent some time afterward trying to tell a version of events that painted him in a different light. That he had simply been trying to share something important, that things had been taken out of context. The people who knew both of us were not especially receptive. His standing in those circles, I understand, has not fully recovered. I did not feel satisfaction at this. I want to be honest about that. What I felt when I heard it was something closer to nothing, which is, I think, the healthiest possible response. The story of Daniel ended the moment I turned my back and walked toward my husband. Everything after that is just epilogue. If you are listening to this and you recognize something in what I have described, the shrinking, the apologizing, the way someone can love you just enough to make the criticism feel like care, I want you to hear me. Not as a story, as a direct statement from me to you. What happened to you was not your fault. The fact that you adjusted, that you made yourself smaller, that you tried so hard to become what someone needed that you lost track of what you were, that is not weakness. That is what trust looks like when it is placed in the wrong hands. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, still trying to understand, still asking yourself what comes next, that is not nothing. That is everything. The rebuild is not glamorous. I will not pretend it is. It is cereal for dinner and concealer in the morning and Thursday phone calls where you say you're fine when you aren't quite. It is slow and it is quiet, and most of it happens when no one is watching. But it happens. The version of yourself that was buried, she is not gone. She is waiting. She has been patient. And she is considerably more stubborn than the person who tried to talk her out of existing. Let her come back. Let her be loud when she has something to say. Let her apply for the thing. Let her take up the space. Let her walk toward the door that opens at the wrong moment and say, clearly, calmly, without performance, "You don't know who I am anymore." Because here is the truth that Daniel taught me, though not in the way he intended. The people who underestimate you are not paying close enough attention, and their failure to see you, their certainty that you are still exactly what they left, is not a fact about you. It is a fact about them. Don't stay small. Don't stay quiet. You were never what they said. Thank you for listening. If this story found you at the right time, share it with someone who needs it.